These were the very first plastic vehicle kits Games Workshop ever produced. 3 for $9.99. Now they sell for hundreds of pounds mint in box, if you can even find one. Before Land Raiders, before Predators, before the endless range of plastic armour we take for granted today, there was this, the Mk1 Rhino. And today, I'm restoring my original 1980s kits and bringing them back to the battlefield. Back when Warhammer 40,000 was first released, we didn't have the incredible range of plastic and resin vehicle kits we see today. In the mid-1980s, I had happily transitioned from building military model kits from Airfix and Tamiya and playing out World War II battles into painting armies of metal cast figures for Dungeons and Dragons and fantasy battles. The Citadel range was much smaller then, and because we were playing Warhammer fantasy battles, we didn't need tanks or aircraft. And our sci-fi games were played out using laser burn and Imperial Commander rules at 15mm scale. We kit-bashed old military 20mm scale models, combined them with those Zoids toys and Star Wars toys, and created an eclectic collection of vehicles for our games. And then 40k changed everything. First came the plastic RTB01 Space Marines alongside the metal personality figures in the blister packs that we were used to. These were giants compared to our 15mm sci-fi armies, and hot on their heels came the Mk1 Rhino kit. Amazingly, you got 3 for $9.99. After buying one box, I thought I had more than enough. If only I'd known they would sell mint in box for over £400 38 years later. In fact, I saw a box of 3 listed on eBay for £625 the other day. There are plenty of videos on YouTube covering the lore of this vehicle in the game. I don't want to repeat that. What I want to do is talk about the history of my 3 original Rhinos, how I'm restoring them for the table again, and show you the other Mark 1s I've acquired so far as part of building out the Fighting Tigers chapter. Now, there's something distinctive about this vehicle that appeals to me. Yes, it was the first Games Workshop plastic vehicle kit, but that alone isn't what makes it significant. It's the design. When these were first released, my first thought was that they looked like a World War I tank crossed with a US M113 APC. But there's a charm that grows on you. The swept back exhausts, the interchangeable front and rear hatches that let you make each Rhino unique, and most distinctive of all, the handrail that wraps round the side of each model. In my opinion, that handrail defines this era of Rhino models. It takes the basic body from a kind of a petite to a muscular look. It introduces a diesel punk detail and quality that simple sculpted panels and switched hatches can't achieve. The problem is the handrails are far less tough than the Marines riding inside. They break easily, they're difficult to repair, the model ends up looking tatty with half a rail missing, and some builders even omit them entirely. So to take my Mark 1s back to the 1980s, but make them tabletop durable, I'm fitting custom handrails using wire instead of plastic. Now, this is brass rod, normally used for pinning figures. You drill both pieces of the figure, insert a cut-off piece of the wire reinforcement, and it makes the joint stronger. Among the parts I've acquired, I noticed I still had a set of handrails on the sprue. I think these are from a second issue of the Rhino kit because the plastic is grey, and I remember the first issue kits being moulded in a kind of a pale beige like these pieces here. I'm using these originals as a guide to bend my wire into the correct shape. The additional supports that project out from the hull mean we need some joins. And I'm going to bend it all to shape with pliers and match it to the original piece. Once the new rail is ready, I mark up where it will sit. At the front and rear, it locates on the side of the hull, into the body at the back, on top of that track cover at the front, and the supports part way down the rail just sit above either side of the crew hatch. Using the drill bit supplied with the pinning rod, which was very handy, I drill out sockets into the hull, and then I use super glue to secure the rails, also gluing the supports along the side to add that extra strength and maintain the original look. So if we compare that, I agree the new wires are a little bit thicker, but they're going to be way, way, way stronger. They're going to last forever now. I'm very happy with the result. Only time will tell if they outlast the originals, but they do feel extremely solid. I have a lot of rhinos to fix, and I quickly realised I wouldn't have enough pinning rod. This fencing wire is the same gauge. I just need to choose lengths that aren't too curved and bent. It works just as effectively and is actually a little bit easier to shape. With the rails done, they're already regaining that rogue trade character. And next, I did the exhaust pieces. They get broken off really easily. Now, what I've done is I've made a piece out of wire. There you can see it. Okay, and I've drilled the end out here so I can pop that in, and voila, we have a fixed exhaust pipe. And if we compare it to an original, there you go. It's pretty close. Most Mark 1s have lost at least one pipe, so there's plenty to repair. And now, with the structural repairs complete, it's time for paint. I begin with the dark grey to give the model a solid base undercoat, and then leaving the grey underneath, I flip the vehicle over and paint the orange base using a mix of bone white to start with, then orange and yellow to achieve the right hue. This original example was brush painted with hobgoblin orange and a black camo applied, again with a brush. This is the only one left with the original paint job. At the time, my airbrush was broken and I didn't have the know-how to fix it, so I went straight in with the brush for the orange and black pattern. Now, for speed, I use rattle cans. The orange and yellow blend over the wraithbone gives a nicely kind of spattered effect, which you can see clearly in this close-up. It's not to everyone's taste, but I like seeing this sort of texture on vehicles. Next, I mask the orange areas and spray Mk1 blue, especially on the sides. It's a very strong colour, so I use it sparingly. Then the top is sprayed matte black to complete the camouflage base. And then, with the tape off, it's onto the details. I paint the tracks, the fittings. I pick these out in black, sometimes green for contrast against the orange, and then a kind of a dark gunmetal. I use a Tamiya gunmetal. The camouflage already breaks up the outline effectively, so lots of heavy detailing isn't really necessary. Now for markings, I've devised a system that works across the entire chapter. So the chapter crest is a tiger outlined in black on a white or a sand coloured or a green circle. So it's what you see here. It's about 10 mil across. The company number is shown with a Roman numeral here, and this is on a blue for a second company. On the opposite side, a squad number appears as a decimal number on a kind of a two-tone square, blue again. And if it's a command vehicle, I'll put a symbol rather than a number. This system also needs to account for vehicles in the motor pool, rather than attached to specific squads. For example, the Scout Company assigns vehicles per mission rather than per squad. And there will be chapter level vehicles which will need a different identifier. And I haven't finalised that yet. I'm designing as I build, and for me, that's part of the fun. On the rear number plate, I've included the chapter number, a Roman numeral for the company, a squad designation, and then a letter indicating how many times the vehicle has been replaced. Because this is one of my original Rhinos, it receives an A. So this vehicle is supposedly nearly 10,000 years old. I doubt we'll see many more A's. With the decals applied, I've finished the painting. Tracks and weapons are that gunmetal with a subtle rust tone. And then I've experimented with an enamel wash. Acrylic washes are excellent, but enamel washes thinned with white spirits have lower surface tension, allowing finer panel lining and sharper detail definition. Now, when first released, these kits included optional stowage, boxes, jerry cans, accessories, not many, but enough. And military vehicles on campaign always carry stowage. Now, having built many World War II and Cold War kits previously, adding stowage, well, it's second nature to me. It breaks up the silhouette and it kind of gives each vehicle a bit of character. And sometimes I weather the vehicle before adding the stowage, sometimes after. There's no strict rule. But this Rhino had its stowage attached back in 1988. I'm not removing it now. I've painted the boxes green and the equipment black, and on others I'll paint the stowage before attaching. The headlights get a chrome silver and the recess accented with matte black. It looks a bit like how I remember cars from the 1980s, and I like it. The headlights are small, but they add those little touches of realism. Now, I remember fitting twin aerials, plastic ones originally. They're long gone, so I've replaced them with thin wire. It bends instead of snapping. Orange, black and white pennants are going to be on here just to add movement and a bit of character. The pennants will just be paper, trimmed and painted. The illusion of movement does most of the work. Now, earlier we talked about the options that came with the kits to give them a bit of variety. On the front, I added this small headlight detail instead of the dozer blade, reminiscent of the British Scorpion light tank from the Cold War. It means this Rhino doesn't have that traditional dozer blade. But when I built these, I wanted variety. This one remained a pure Rhino APC, and the others were converted into Razorbacks. This one with a 1/72nd scale Chieftain tank turret, and the other one with a Predator turret upgrade. Now, I have a theory about why Games Workshop called these the Rhino, and I think it's to do with a bit of real-world history. You see, during the Normandy campaign in World War II, Allied forces struggled with a particular type of terrain just inland from the coast called the bocage. Thick hedgerows growing on top of earth and stone embankments, but the look of it kind of defines that Normandy landscape. Tanks couldn't pass through easily, cresting the hedges exposed to the weak armour under here. Engineers began fitting improvised pronged blades made from beach anti-tank obstacles. These modified tanks were named Rhinoceros, later shortened to Rhino. Historians debate their strategic impact, but I can imagine those soldiers were certainly grateful for armoured support smashing through hedges and clearing a path for them. And that's where I think the name came from. And Games Workshop know a catchy name helps sell products, and that's why I think we have Rhinos in Warhammer 40k. Now, this one may not have its horns because of that front light panel, but I'm going to keep it as it is. Others will carry a variety of dozer blades. I was thinking a little edge highlighting on the orange, not on the black, will make the colour pop and define the camouflage. But on reflection, seeing this almost complete, I think it's fine as it is. All this needs is a matte varnish and it's ready for the table. I've got many more Mk1 Rhinos lined up to finish, and I hope you've enjoyed this combination of old school restoration, speed painted camouflage and modern finishing techniques, and how I'm bringing these iconic vehicles back into action. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe, as it will help YouTube show this to more viewers. And in the future, there's going to be more armoured builds and restorations coming as I finish the chapter, and I can't wait to show you the next project that I've already started. And with that, I'll see you on the battlefield.